Hey and welcome to another tutorial. Today we will continue where we've left with those badges and blobs inside Microsoft Word using Visual Basic for applications, that is using macro and at the same time using polar coordinates, and we will modify the code to not draw badges but instead to draw those like rows like circle patterns or flower like patterns. And you will see that the code to draw those different shapes is actually very similar to draw the badges. So let's just quickly summarize what we've done with those badges. If I open the macro to draw those badges, you will see there is a constant segments which says the number of segments, number of parts from which the outline will be drawn. It's also used as the size of the polypoints array, which is used to store all the points. We have the radius, angle, the origin. We set the origin to some value, and inside the loop we just increment the angle. We have to convert the angle from degrees to radians, so instead of going from 0 to 360 it has to go from 0 to 2 pi. Then we set the radius based on some static value and the cosine function, and we convert this using the when we have the radius and angle, we convert this from the polar coordinates into Cartesian coordinates. So let's just very quickly talk about the polar coordinates. Usually when we draw something inside Microsoft Word or in other application, we use the what's called the Cartesian coordinates when we have the x and y coordinate. Instead we can also specify the origin point being the 0 and 0 degrees, and we can specify any point on the canvas as a distance from the origin being the r as a radius, and the angle which is usually named theta. Now we cannot tell Word to draw the point on the position r and then theta, so we have to first convert it from the polar coordinates into the Cartesian coordinates into the x and y position, and we do this simply by setting the x equals r radius time cosine the angle theta, and the y is r radius times sine the angle theta. Now if we set the r, the radius, to be same all the time, we plot a circle around the origin, but we can change the radius while we increase the angle. That's actually what we were doing for those badges. So for the radius we were using a cosine function which goes like this. This is like a cosine function. It goes between -1 and 1, so this is the -1 and this is the 1, and we simply just multiply it by center number to make this a little bit bigger. Maybe like I think I was using a number 10 or so, maybe 5. So it goes between -5 and 5, and then we just add this to a certain value like the 80 or so. So it's a little bit more distant from the center. So if we use this cosine function and use this as a radius, what it will do, that the radius will oscillate same as the cosine function, and since we are increasing the angle it will go around the full circle. And the actual number of spikes, like how many of those small spikes I do have around the circle, that's based on the value inside the cosine function. So angle times 10 means that I will have 10 different spikes around the center, around the circle. I can quickly try it by just running this macro. If I delete those 3 shapes and run this macro again, or for the first time, I will get this shape where, if you count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different spikes. So what happens if I started decreasing the first static number, the static value, and increasing the decreasing the static value and increasing the cosine function? If I just decrease this 80 to a smaller value like 50, you will see it will get closer to the center. It's getting smaller. So if I change this to 30, it's even smaller. It's probably the same color as the previous one, so it's not visible, but it's getting smaller with the smaller first value. If I start decreasing the cosine function, for example times 10, you will see the spikes will be more spread out. So if I increase this all the way to 30, now it will oscillate between the 0 and 30, because I'm just calculating 30 plus minus, going cosine function, going from -30 to 30. So I'm going from 0 to 60, actually 0 to 60. So I already have some kind of flower pattern going in here. What I will do is I will probably change the fill to be no fill for now and just set the outline color, which I don't have right now. So I will set the line color to be some color. I will probably set this to a static value like 1. It's probably black. And I will set the Line.Visible to 1 and Line.Weight to maybe, I don't know, 1.5. I will also set the fill color, Fill.Visible to be not visible, so it's 0. So if I run this again, I will again get this nice looking flower pattern. What I can do is I can not have any static offset at all. So if I just change this to 0, what it will do is it will just use the value of cosine being between minus 30 and 30. So if I want to somehow visualize this, I can visualize this as this, this is the like a origin point, which is of course our set origin, but we can think about it as 0 and 0 degrees, and we start from here. So if we calculate the cosine function, it's the maximum value up here, then it will go closer to the 0, but it will not stop here. It will actually go to the minus value, so it will go like this, and then it will continue in the in the positive values, and it will form some kind of like this flower shape. And we can actually try this if we set the number of inside the cosine function. If we set the number to be, I believe, 3, we will get exactly this shape. I will probably raise this number to a bigger value, like 60, so it's a little bit bigger. The thing with this shape is we are drawing it 2 times around the center, around the circle, and you can easily tell by if you try to set the fill. If I try to set the fill, it will do nothing, and that's because we are drawing this shape 2 times. It's not visible because there is no offset. If I start adding some offset, if I add 10 plus this big value, you will see that it's actually, those are 2 shapes which are being offset a little bit. Now I can set the fill, but I cannot set the fill for this shape because those 2 shapes, or this shape is traced 2 times, which tells Word that I want those parts to be not filled at all. I can solve this by not going around the full circle, not going about the 360 degrees. I can just go from 0 to 1 pi. So I can either change it in here to just 1 pi, or what I can probably do is I can change the 360 times 0.5 or divided by 2. That will go around the circle only half of the circle. But just because this cosine function goes to negative values, I will have the full shape. If I run this macro again, I will get the full shape. Maybe this doesn't look like a full shape. Probably have something wrong. Okay, let's see what I have wrong. Okay, I have this offset. I have to get rid of this offset. Now if I run this, I get this shape which is only traced once. So if I want, I can set the fill to this shape. Now the fun begins if I set those numbers inside the cosine function to different values. There is the article on Wikipedia, which is the Rose Mathematics, which shows exactly what we are doing in here. There is also the equation for the polar coordinates which we are using. The r equals cosine k times the angle, which is actually what we are using in our code. We are using k radius equals cosine the angle times some value, and we are of course increasing it by some value just to make sure that it will not be drawn between the coordinates -1 and 1. It will be much bigger than that, so we can actually see it in Microsoft Word. There is this nice picture in here which sets the parameter k as the in a form of n divided by d. So if I just ignore the d being the 1, if I just keep increasing the first value, the n, you will see I will get more petals for the rows. So I can try this. I can just try to increase the value inside. I will set it to 2. That should give me 2. I have to set the number of turns to 1. So let's say to 1, 4. I can increase it to 5, for example. That should give me 5 different petals, and I can go on like this forever. Maybe 8. I will get even more. So those are the basic rose shapes. I can create more advanced ones by plugging in some fractional value, as you can see in here. If I set this to be, for example, I don't know, I kind of like those for example 2 divided by 3. This is like a nice looking pattern. So if I plug in the value being the 2 divided by 3, I will get some shape again. It's not a full shape because the way we are drawing it, we have to set the number of turns to a bigger value. So we have to set, instead of going from 0 to 2 pi, we have to go, or 0 to 360 degrees, we have to go, I believe, 3 times around the circle to make sure that everything is being drawn the way it should be. So this is another shape and I'm pretty sure you can try all the other shapes. Just make sure that when you plug in the value into here, the number of turns would be probably different based on the value. So for example, if I want to draw something very dense like 7 divided by 8, like this one, 7 divided by 8, I probably should increase the number of turns for the angle to 8 as well, I believe. Okay, and I can quickly tell if this shape is right or not if the first and last points are on the same position, but just trying to set the fill for the shape. And you can see that this is working, so the number of turns is actually right for this shape. Kind of like this fill pattern going here, and just because the way it's being drawn and the way that Word decides which parts of the polygon should be filled and not filled. But that's probably for another tutorial. I believe that that's it for today's tutorial. Here is one more time the list of different rows parents which I was creating previously, and make sure to check the Wikipedia page with all the different shapes which you can easily get by just plugging in those different values into the cosine function. And that's it. Thanks for watching.